Strength in silence is one of those truths that rarely gets talked about, but it shapes everything about the way older women carry themselves because silence is not emptiness, it's control. It's choosing not to let every thought or feeling spill out, just to fill the air. It's knowing that you don't have to win every argument or prove every point to still stand strong and respected. It's the discipline of restraint. And that restraint is a kind of strength most people underestimate because in a world where everyone is loud and quick to react, the one who pauses and keeps certain things unsaid is the one who holds real power, and that's why older women are often misunderstood as secretive or reserved when really they're operating from a position of wisdom. They've learned that not every truth needs to be spoken to have an impact, and not every battle is worth the energy it takes to fight. This strength in silence comes from years of watching and listening instead of rushing to be heard. They've spent lifetimes learning the patterns of people, seeing what drives them, what breaks them, what makes them repeat mistakes. And because they have this perspective, they don't need to call everything out. Sometimes they know the outcome before it even arrives, and silence becomes a way to step back and let people show who they really are without interference. It's not avoidance, it's strategy. They understand that letting others talk sometimes tells you more than asking the right question ever could. And in that silence, they gather more information, more clarity, and more certainty about what truly matters in the moment. When you look closely at the way older women respond in conflict, you'll see this strength play out. They don't rush to defend themselves the way younger people often do. They don't feel the need to fill gaps in conversation with excuses or justifications. They let the silence do the work because silence has a way of making others rethink what they've said. Silence forces people to sit in their own words. And when you learn how to use it well, it becomes a shield against manipulation and misunderstanding. Silence isn't weakness. It's a deliberate choice that says, I don't owe you my reaction. And that kind of strength takes years to fully understand. The other side of this silence is protection, because older women have learned through experience that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They've seen how people can twist words, use vulnerability against you, or pretend to care when they don't. So silence becomes a filter. It guards the most valuable parts of who they are. It keeps their dignity intact and their peace protected. What they don't say is just as important as what they do, because it sets boundaries without ever needing to explain them. They know that revealing less often earns more respect than oversharing, and it's that self-control that keeps their power intact long after others have lost theirs. There's also an emotional strength in knowing when to stay quiet because emotions run high in life, and most people speak from the heat of the moment without realizing how permanent words can be. Older women have lived long enough to regret saying things they can't take back, so now they hold back, they measure, they breathe, and then they choose silence because silence never has to be apologized for. It never has to be fixed or defended. It never makes a wound deeper, and that awareness gives them a calm presence that stands out in a world full of noise. When everyone else is quick to shout, they stand steady, and that steadiness is a form of influence all its own. Silence also gives space for others to step forward and reveal themselves, because when you're not constantly talking, you notice what people say when they're uncomfortable. You notice how they react to not getting an immediate answer. You notice who respects the pause and who tries to fill it with pressure. Those little observations become tools of wisdom. And it's why older women often seem to see through people quicker than others. They aren't in a hurry to reveal themselves because they're too busy watching how others reveal themselves, and the insights they gain from that are part of the strength they carry quietly but unmistakably. In the end, strength in silence is not about saying nothing. It's about saying less with more purpose. It's about choosing your words, like currency, spending them carefully and knowing when silence is worth more than any explanation. It's about standing firm without the need to prove yourself over and over again. And it's about creating an inner confidence that doesn't depend on recognition or validation from the outside world. Because when you master silence, you realize it's not about withholding. It's about protecting your power and using it only where it counts most. The value of experience is something that can't be rushed or borrowed. It's something that life teaches only to those who are willing to live through it fully. And older women carry this truth in ways that are often invisible to others. Every success they've had, every mistake they've made, every heartbreak they've endured has given them layers of understanding that no classroom could provide, and that experience becomes a kind of quiet authority. They don't have to announce what they know because it shows in how they carry themselves, how they react in moments of pressure, how they keep perspective when others are overwhelmed. And that is why their presence feels grounding, because they've already walked through storms and come out the other side with lessons that can't be explained, only lived. What experience does is change how you see challenges. Instead of panicking at the first sign of trouble, you recognize patterns. You see the familiar signs of how people behave under stress. You've been through cycles of loss and renewal, so you don't mistake setbacks for endings, and that knowledge becomes a secret advantage. Older women don't always share openly. They know how to solve problems, not because they read about solutions, but because they've had to build their own solutions from scratch when no one else was coming to help. And that kind of resilience leaves behind a wisdom that becomes instinct. It's the kind of instinct that shows up in the way they make decisions and the way they can read situations faster than others. There's also a kind of patience that comes with experience, because when you've seen enough of life, you understand that not everything needs to be decided in the heat of the moment. Younger people often want immediate results. They want closure right away. They want certainty and guarantees. But experience teaches you that time is the greatest teacher and the greatest healer, and older women embody this patience by holding back from rushing into things. They trust that clarity will come. If you wait long enough, they trust that the truth reveals itself with time, and that patience is a strength that feels almost unshakable because it's rooted in years of seeing temporary chaos eventually turn into order. Experience also builds perspective on what truly matters in life, and that's one of the most valuable lessons they hold close, because after decades of watching people chase approval money or recognition only to discover those things don't bring peace. Older women know what actually lasts. They know that relationships matter more than reputation. They know that health matters more than appearance. They know that peace matters more than attention. And they don't need to prove this truth to anyone. They simply live it in the way they prioritize their energy. And that prioritization is what makes their choices so powerful. They know what to walk away from and what to fight for, because experience has already taught them the cost of getting it wrong. Another part of this value of experience is the ability to carry both joy and pain without letting either one define them completely. They've lost things they've loved, and they've gained things they never expected. And instead of letting those extremes break them, they've learned to hold them together in balance so they don't get swept away by success or destroyed by failure. They know that both are temporary, and that wisdom gives them a steadiness most people can't explain. It's the reason they can smile even when they're hurting, or stay calm even when they're celebrating, because they don't let life's highs and lows dictate their worth. They've lived long enough to know that stability comes from the inside, not the outside. It's also important to realize that experience gives them the ability to guide without forcing. They don't need to control others or push their opinions, because they understand that everyone has to live their own lessons the same way they did. So instead of demanding, they model. Instead of lecturing, they listen. And instead of insisting, they wait. And when someone is ready for their wisdom, it comes not as a loud command, but as a quiet insight that feels simple but carries the weight of decades. That's why when they speak even briefly, their words stay with you long after the conversation ends, because their wisdom is built on proof, not theory. And perhaps the most powerful part of experience is the confidence it gives to trust yourself after years of questioning decisions, after years of wondering what people think, after years of learning through trial and error. You eventually realize you've already survived more than you ever thought possible, and that survival gives you self-trust. Older women walk with that kind of trust. They know they can face whatever comes next because they've already faced so much and lived to tell it. They don't need validation to confirm their worth. They don't need approval to confirm their choices. They have the value of experience, and that alone is enough to carry them through. Resilience over time is not something people are born with. It is something shaped by every trial, every disappointment, every setback. And older women embody this truth in a way that is both subtle and powerful, because when you've carried the weight of challenges for decades, you learn not only how to survive, but how to stand taller because of them. They've seen hardships that would have broken others, yet they found ways to keep going, to adapt, to reinvent themselves. And what that creates is a strength that doesn't have to announce itself. It's visible in the way they move through the world, steady, calm, and unwilling to be shaken by the small things that others make big, because resilience teaches you what really deserves your energy and what doesn't. Over the years, resilience becomes less about bouncing back quickly and more about enduring with grace. It's not about pretending the pain wasn't real, but about integrating that pain into your life without letting it destroy you. Older women have had to navigate grief, betrayal, financial struggles, family pressures, and health battles, and instead of letting those struggles leave them bitter, they've turned them into sources of wisdom, resilience, gave them the ability to see that suffering is not the end. It's a teacher, and the lessons it brings are ones you carry forever. They know that every scar is a reminder of strength, and every moment of survival is proof that they are stronger than circumstances. One of the unspoken truths about resilience is that it is rarely built in moments of comfort. Comfort doesn't stretch you. Comfort doesn't force you to change. It's the storms that shape you, and older women have walked through storms people around them may never even know about, and they don't talk about them because they don't need to. The evidence is already there in their composure. Resilience over time has made them less reactive, less desperate to explain themselves, and more intentional in every move they make. Because when you've survived enough, you stop fearing the unknown and start trusting your ability to handle it. Resilience also gives them a kind of perspective that is rare in a fast-moving world. They don't get caught up in temporary noise or trends because they know how quickly things change. They've seen generations chase what doesn't last. They've seen people collapse under pressure. They've seen fortunes appear and vanish and relationships rise and fall. And through it all, they've learned that the real measure of strength is not how you shine when things are easy, but how you carry yourself when everything is falling apart. Resilience is the quiet force that keeps you grounded when others crumble. It's what allows them to move through chaos with dignity. Another part of resilience over time is adaptability, because life doesn't always follow the plan, and older women know this better than anyone. Jobs are lost, loved ones pass away, expectations are shattered, but resilience has taught them not to stay broken in those moments. They pivot, they rebuild, they start over, and in starting over again and again, they become unafraid of change. They don't resist it, they accept it, and that acceptance becomes a form of freedom. They aren't chained to the fear of what might happen because they've already proven they can handle what has happened. Resilience over time makes you flexible without losing your foundation, and that is a rare kind of strength. There's also a level of compassion that resilience builds, because when you've been through pain yourself, you start to understand the pain of others without judgment. Older women know what it feels like to be misunderstood, to be dismissed, to be overlooked. And because of that, they carry empathy, not as weakness, but as wisdom. They don't rush to criticize. They don't minimize the struggles of others. Instead, they offer understanding and patience. Resilience has taught them that everyone is fighting battles you can't see, and that knowledge makes them gentler but also sharper. They can see through excuses while still offering grace, because they've learned the difference between weakness and growth. And perhaps the most defining part of resilience over time is the confidence it creates. Not the loud kind of confidence that needs to be proven, but the quiet kind that lives deep inside. It's the confidence of someone who has already been broken and rebuilt more than once. It's the confidence of someone who doesn't fear failure because failure has already shaped them. Resilience over time is the kind of strength that whispers rather than shouts, and older women carry it as one of their greatest untold secrets. It's not about never falling, it's about rising every single time, stronger, wiser, and more unshakable than before. The power of selective sharing is something that sets older women apart because over the years they've learned that not everyone deserves access to their truth and not every detail of their life needs to be handed over freely. They understand that privacy is not secrecy, it is protection. It is the ability to decide who has earned the right to hear their story and who has not. And this decision doesn't come from arrogance, it comes from experience. They have seen how words can be twisted, how vulnerabilities can be taken advantage of, and how people often ask out of curiosity rather than genuine care. And through that, they've realized that selective sharing is not only wise, it is necessary for protecting peace, dignity, and inner strength. There's a quiet discipline in knowing what to say and what to leave unsaid, because in a world that constantly pressures people to overshare, older women resist that pull. They know that telling everyone everything doesn't build connection, it dilutes it. True connection comes from choosing carefully who to trust and creating a safe space for your truth to be received with respect. And not everyone is capable of that respect. So they guard their experiences, not because they are ashamed, but because they value them too deeply to let them be handled carelessly. This ability to hold back creates a sense of mystery and strength around them, and it shows that they do not measure their worth by how much they reveal, but by how much they protect. Selective sharing also creates boundaries without confrontation when you decide not to disclose every detail of your life. You send a message without saying a word. You say, I choose what you know about me. I decide what you have access to. And in that choice lies freedom. Older women no longer feel the need to explain themselves or justify their decisions to anyone who demands it. They share when they want to, not when they're pressured to. And that kind of control is liberating because it shifts the power dynamic. It reminds others that access to your life is a privilege, not a right, and that privilege has to be earned. Another powerful part of selective sharing is that it allows them to maintain their individuality while still being connected to others. They don't lose themselves in trying to please everyone. They don't stretch themselves thin by carrying other people's expectations. Instead, they stay centered because they know what parts of their lives are theirs to hold privately and what parts they are willing to share with the world. This separation creates balance. It prevents burnout, and it gives them a strong sense of identity that doesn't depend on external approval. Because when you protect parts of your story, you keep a piece of yourself that no one else can touch. Over time, selective sharing becomes a form of self-respect because you begin to realize that your experiences, your struggles, and your wisdom are valuable currency, and not everyone is qualified to spend it freely. Older women carry lessons that could change lives, but they choose carefully when and how to release them. They know that timing matters and that the listener matters. Some truths are only useful when the person is ready to receive them. So instead of wasting energy on deaf ears, they wait for the right moment and the right person. And when they do share, it lands with weight because it was given intentionally, not casually. There's also strength in withholding because silence in itself communicates more than words. Sometimes when older women choose not to answer a question or reveal a detail, it's not because they don't know, it's because they've learned that silence itself can set boundaries. It can protect their heart, and it can force others to respect limits without the need for explanation. Selective sharing teaches others to value what is given because they understand that not everything is available on demand, and that scarcity makes their words and presence all the more impactful. What makes the power of selective sharing so profound is that it transforms relationships and interactions into something more meaningful instead of giving away everything they hold close. What they do share becomes precious. It carries weight, it carries trust, it carries intentionality, and it leaves an impression that lingers because you know it wasn't handed out lightly. It was chosen carefully and delivered with purpose. And that deliberate choice is what gives their presence authority without needing attention. It's what keeps their peace protected while still allowing them to connect deeply with the people who have truly earned a place in their circle. Wisdom hidden in simplicity is one of the most overlooked truths older women carry because on the surface, the choices they make may look ordinary, but beneath them lies decades of experience shaping every decision they don't need, complicated philosophies or grand speeches to prove their knowledge. Instead, it shows in how they live in the quiet ways they prioritize peace over chaos, in the way they choose kindness over pride, and in the way they focus on what actually matters. Their wisdom is disguised in routines that seem small yet carry powerful meaning because when you've lived long enough, you understand that the most valuable lessons aren't loud, they're subtle, and you find them in the habits that are repeated every single day. The beauty of this simplicity is that it cuts through distraction in a world that pushes people to chase more older women, lean into less drama, less noise, less need for validation. They've learned that the more you strip away the unnecessary, the more peace you find. And this is where their wisdom shines because it reminds us that strength isn't about adding more to your life, but about removing what doesn't serve you anymore. They don't waste energy on arguments that go nowhere. They don't cling to people who drain them. They don't chase things that will fade. They conserve their time and their energy for what will actually last. And that lesson is hidden in the way they live, simply without apology. Simplicity also becomes a form of clarity. When you stop filling your life with unnecessary complications, you start to see what really matters. Older women know this because they've spent years untangling themselves from pressures, expectations, and regrets. And what remains is an ability to see life in its purest form. They know the value of a quiet morning. They know the peace of a walk instead of a rush. They know the richness of listening instead of talking. And that clarity comes from having already walked the hard path of excess when they tried to do it all and be it all and realized that chasing everything leaves you with nothing real. There's also wisdom in the way simplicity reveals truth about people, because when you stop needing to impress or perform, you see others for who they are without distraction. Older women don't fall for pretense as easily because they aren't dazzled by appearances. They pay attention to actions, they notice consistency, they value presence, and this ability to see past the surface is part of their hidden wisdom. Simplicity sharpens your focus. It allows you to notice details others miss, and that makes their insight feel almost instinctive, when really it's the result of decades of cutting through unnecessary noise. Simplicity also teaches gratitude, because when you stop chasing bigger and better, you start appreciating what you already have. Older women carry this gratitude in the way they find joy in the little things, a shared meal, a conversation, a quiet evening. Those moments hold weight because they've seen how quickly life can change and how fragile happiness can be. They no longer wait for grand milestones to feel alive. They've discovered that fulfillment comes in everyday choices and that wisdom is often disguised as contentment, because knowing how to be satisfied in the present is one of the hardest lessons life has to teach. Another layer of wisdom hidden in simplicity is emotional strength, because living simply requires letting go of pride, letting go of the need to prove, letting go of the constant chase for recognition. Older women understand that when you simplify your needs, you free yourself from the